Hello everyone, Clack the Geek here and welcome back to a brand new video, and today we're going to be reviewing the latest missing episode animation, Fury from the Deep. Now this is obviously a missing second Doctor story from the 5th season of Classic Who, and all 6 episodes are missing. Nothing survives other than the audio and a handful of surviving clips. But luckily it's been animated and was released in September of this year. Now, this is a bit of a fan favourite. It is a fan favourite. People love this one, and it's one that people have wanted to be animated for a long time now. It's up there with the likes of Evil of the Daleks, or the Daleks Master Plan, or, the really iconic stories. So, let's get into the review. I'll be talking about the story and the animation. So let's start off with the animation first. Now, in my opinion, this is a massive step down from the Macra Terror and the Faceless ones. Now, I am aware that it was made by a different animation company, so that's why it's a different style, and it was made during the 2020 global pandemic, but you can tell it's not quite up to scratch. I think the character design just looks a bit odd. Like, they obviously look quite 2D and quite simplistic, and it's a bit of a quite jarring jump from what we got in Macra and Faceless ones, so it does take time to get used to. And the character animation can sometimes be a bit sort of choppy, a bit start-stoppy, so there's scenes where you can hear people moving but they're just sort of stood still, not doing anything, so it can be a bit jarring at points. But the animation isn't bad. There are some really good stuff. The backgrounds and the set pieces look great. The oil rig is so nicely detailed, and the lights and the fog, it lends itself really well to the animation. The TARDIS console room looks really good as well, with the console, the roundels, and that little scene where they're doing the experiment with the Bunsen burners and the little flasks. That's a really cool scene, and it's really nicely detailed. And the animation can really help lend an atmosphere to the episode, like at the end of part 3 when Maggie slowly walks into the water on the coast. It's really atmospheric, and it works really well. And the stuff, the set pieces with the seaweed and the foam and some of the action scenes, they do work really well. Now, I don't mean to sound ungrateful. I am grateful that we got the animation. I don't think it's bad, but it is definitely a step down from Macra and Faceless ones. I'm yet to see Power of the Daleks. Just a little side note, I managed to notice a couple of Easter eggs, one of which is a wanted poster for the Roger Delgado Master. There's probably some others that I didn't pick up on, but there are plenty of Easter eggs scattered throughout, and it's always fun seeing them. So now I've covered the animation, what do I think of the actual story itself? Well, let's find out. This is a story that's held in very high regard, and you know what? I think it deserves it. I think it is a brilliant story. Patrick Troughton is fantastic as the second Doctor. He's one of my favourite Doctors by far. He's definitely in sort of my top 5. And this story, he's really good. He's very proactive. He does a lot of... he's very active. He does a lot of the problem solving and the action, and it's really good. And also the TARDIS team are really good. I love, obviously, the second Doctor and Jamie. They're a great duo. But you've also got Victoria, and this is her final story, which we'll get onto later with her departure. But this TARDIS team, I think, is great. You've also got some other pretty cool characters, like Dr. Harris, who's one of the scientists at the base, but because of stuff, he has his wife who he needs to look after and stuff like that, it makes him very memorable, and you can connect with him, and he's a pretty likeable character. You've also got Ronson, who's sort of the human villain of the story, and he gets taken over by the seaweed, and he's a pretty cool character as well. And then you have Mr. Oak and Mr. Quill, a duo of engineers at the facility, and this leads me very nicely onto arguably the most iconic scene of the episode, where these two literally gas someone, make them pass out with their own breath. Now, thankfully, we do have the clip for this scene, and it's such an iconic scene. The shot composition with the mirror, seeing them enter the room, the way the music slowly builds and builds as they slowly approach, and just the face that he makes, and the heartbeat sound, them choking Maggie to death. It's a really creepy scene, and it's embedded into every Doctor Who fan's head. If there's one thing that this story gets absolutely nailed on, it's the atmosphere. It's such an atmospheric story. It's a proper base under siege affair, which was typical of the Troughton era, but this is really good. You know, you've got the oil rig setting, which is a really interesting setting for a Doctor Who story, by the coast and the sea, which gives it a real air of mystery to it. You've got the sound of the heartbeat, you've got the really great music done by the late Dudley Simpson, which is really well done in this story. And it manages to get the horror aspect of the episode bang on. You've also got killer seaweed and deadly foam as your antagonist. Now, yes, that does sound silly, but Fury from the Deep makes it work in a way where it's actually quite intimidating. I mean, I've always found seaweed a really not a very nice thing, so to see it in a Doctor Who story as like the antagonist is really cool. It's something that the new series have gone to do quite a bit, you know, with stuff like the Weeping Angels, making statues scary, etc. But it's this kind of cool sci-fi horror that I like, taking something for everyday life that might seem a bit odd and, you know, adding a cool sci-fi twist on it, and I always love that. Also, a little fact, this is the very first story to have the sonic screwdriver in. Don't really know, I just thought it was a pretty interesting fact that I thought was worth putting in the review. So let's talk about Victoria's exit, because this is companion Victoria's final story. So what happens is, after all the stuff with the seaweed, after they've all been defeated, you know, everyone's celebrating, and Victoria clearly wants to sort of settle down, and she doesn't really want to go on adventuring, but she's unsure whether she wants to leave, as she'll miss the Doctor and Jamie, and it's a really nice thing to have at the end of episode 6. I mean, Victoria wasn't exactly the most adventurous companion. I mean, it's not a criticism, but she was often stereotyped as like the Scream Queen, you know, the damsel in distress, which I think is quite unfair, because she does have a really interesting character, and it is brought to the forefront in the story. And to be fair, throughout her time in the TARDIS, she did have she had a lot to go for. You know, her father was killed by the Daleks in her very first episode, and then she had to put up with Cybermen, Yeti, Ice Warriors, etc. So you can sympathise with her. But getting back to her exit scene, it's a really nice, understated moment, because she's still unsure whether she wants to leave or not, so they give her a night to think about it, and she decides to stay with the Harrises. It's a nice, understated exit, which isn't too overblown, but it's not too out the blue either. They do spend a nice 5 to 10 minutes on it at the end of episode 6, and it's in keeping with the character, and it's just a really sweet exit. So overall, I'm going to give this story a 9 out of 10. I think it's a brilliant story, and even with the animation not being quite up to scratch, the fact that I can overlook it and then really get myself immersed in the story that there is a testament to how good it is. The setting's great, the cast is great, the pacing's really good considering it's a 6-parter, the horror's really well delivered, and it's just a brilliant story, and yeah, I love it.